Welcome back to the Bluechip Breakdown of all fans. I'm your host, Bull. Fall camp is officially over with, and now we are in our mock game week. We're probably doing a lot of focusing on NC State, not too in depth, but probably just an introduction to who the key playmakers are, what their schemes are, things like that. I think that's what we'll be focusing on the most this entire week. But then on Sunday, we flip the page to UT Chat officially and focus on them for that whole week because we know that you can't overlook anybody. But then on that following Sunday after UT Chat, we will begin our install for NC State. So it is football season. That's my whole point. And I want to go on ahead and recap fall camp and just give y'all my 10 takeaways from all of fall camp. Also talk about what our depth chart could potentially look like, at least in my opinion, heading into week one. I think that it will change, maybe not drastically, but in some spots, I think that it will change a lot before we get to the Oklahoma game. There's still a few spots that we haven't quite gotten ironed out just yet. But as always, y'all, please make sure to like and subscribe to this channel. We are almost up to 6,000 subscribers. I think that we can get there before kickoff. So just make sure that if you have been watching our content, make sure that you are subscribed. If you like our content, that helps us out tremendously. That's a major way to help us to continue to grow. Also, a major shout out to everyone that is a member of this channel. You can become a member and get the exclusive content by clicking the join button just below this video. Huge shout out to everyone that's been donating to this channel. You can also donate to this channel by scanning the Cash App QR code wherever it's going to be at on this screen with your smartphone. All of the links will be down in the description below. I also want to say this is very important that we are planning on bringing a lot of people on for our live streams this entire season, whether it's pregame or it's postgame. And the only way for you to be included in that is to either join us on Patreon. Okay, we've already sent a message out to the people on Patreon, but if you have been donating to this channel or if you have been a member of this channel, all you have to do is go on over to Patreon. Again, the link will be down in the description below. You can join for free. You can get a 7-day free trial. Send me a message with your YouTube name or with your Cash App tag, and we will put y'all into the hat because there's so many people. We can only get on so many for each stream, but we're going to try to get, we're going to try to get most of y'all on, for the first stream, which will be pregame, and then everyone else on for the second stream, which will be post-game. And, we will actually do a drawing for that following week as well if there's anything left over. So please keep that in mind. We just appreciate all of the support from everyone. And, again, please make sure to like and subscribe. If you want to contact us, please give us a follow on social media. That is a good way to contact us. I think the email is going to be the best way. All of that will be down in the description below. We appreciate y'all so much. Let's go ahead and jump into this video. All right, so first and foremost, I want to give y'all my 10 takeaways from fall camp. Number one is going to be that this team is healthy. All of our running backs are ready to go. Now, some people are a little bit banged up, maybe dealing with some bumps and bruises, things like that. But this is football. That's to be expected at this point in fall camp. The only major injury that we have was to Jordan Thomas. And of course, that's a really big one. I think he was due for a breakout year. You hate that for him. You hate that for this team. But I do feel like we've got some players that can step up at that position. Biggest thing, though, is that Cam Seldon is fully cleared. He's back. He's ready to rock and roll. We thought that he would be fully cleared by the first game. Does he play in this first game? If he does, it's going to be very, very limited. In my opinion, I don't think that he needs to get too many reps, right? You give Dylan Sampson, I would say maybe 6 to 8 carries, something like that. But we need to see what Bluechip gives us, what Peyton Lewis gives us, and what Khalifa Keith can give us more than, I would say Sampson or Cam Seldon. So that's just the way that I would do it personally. We don't know how it's all going to play out, but I would definitely anticipate that versus UT Chat, we should get everybody out there on the field, at least as many people as we possibly can. So that's very, very encouraging because this is going to be such a long season. And I love the simple fact that this staff has identified that and said, look, we just want to be healthy. So we don't have to go full tackling, right? I mean, Brew's back. He actually got to go in our previous scrimmage, even though it was a thud scrimmage. I think part of the reason that it was only thud was because we knew that Brew wanted to go and then we were going to let him go. We don't want him getting hit in his lower body. Thud is typically just like an upper body, it's kind of like wrap up, smack him some, it's not full contact. So one of my biggest question marks, though, just before we move on to the next spot, with all of this, just kind of talking about the way that we've handled our injuries and just kind of managed our entire team, is that I wouldn't say overly concerned, but I do think that in the first couple of games, the open field tackling could be an issue. And I think that that's going to be really big just because our pass rush There's so much talk about our front that I think that teams are probably going to try to do a whole lot of quick screens, things like that. So the open field tackling is going to be big. But typically for any team, it's not great to start off seasons, especially if you look at the NFL. And that's pretty much the way that we're handling our entire roster is like an NFL team. We're going to go out there, we're going to kind of do some things, but we're not going to go full throttle with going all the way down to the ground. We're going to stay off the ground. So, it's going to take us a little bit of time to get acclimated to the open field tackling. Whole point is, I don't think that it's going to be a major deal for us. Now on to number two, and this one's pretty obvious. I think everyone knows this, but our defensive line is going to be very dominant. And the reason that I wanted to make sure that I put this in here is because sometimes we overlook it, right? Sometimes we can take that for granted, but you can't. That room is just going to be absolutely incredible. And it's not just because of the amount of talent that we have. There's a ton of really good, I think, playmakers. There's a lot of people that will get rotated in that it's not a major drop off. Okay. Maybe not as much high end talent, but I think it's still really good. The major thing, in my opinion, is the way that everyone's bought in. And that starts at the top with the staff. And then with all the veterans that we have returning for this season, they're going to make sure that everyone is on the same page of, hey, look, this is how we do things inside of this room. These are our expectations. And that's really big just because it will continue the culture that Coach G wants. But outside of that, you look at all of the different mindsets, inside of that room. You kind of hear some of the stories that everyone's been through. And it's some real dogs that's been through, I mean, some real street stuff inside of that room. And that's exactly what you need. But I also feel like there's a ton of confidence. It's not overconfidence. It's the confidence that comes from number one, like we just said, being bought in, understanding what you came from and saying, hey, look, this might be, for those veterans, my last opportunity to come out here and prove myself and taking it that seriously and saying, look, no one's going to stop us, especially our own teammates. You're not going to hinder us. So y'all will be bought in. And just putting in that extra work, I think from top to bottom, I think that just having that amount of confidence is going to be so big heading into this season. Now, if I do have one question mark, and it's not a major one, but if I have any question marks about our front on defense, it's going to be how do we deal with some of these up-tempo teams. Now, of course, they go up against an up-tempo team in practice or, pretty much every single day. I would say definitely throughout all of fall camp, spring camp, things like that, because we haven't done any installs. So they should be pretty acclimated to it. But at the same time, having the mindset of we're so deep and we're going to rotate so much that we won't get gassed, I think that could kind of, play some sort of a factor versus teams like Oklahoma, Mississippi State, whoever wants to run tempo. That could be a minor issue. Again, I don't think it's going to be a major one, but that room is absolutely loaded. And I think that they have a pretty good opportunity to go down as one of the all-time greats, period. Now, on to number three. This is another one that should be pretty obvious to most of us, but Nico is going to be special. And we can see that he's got all of the physical traits and skill sets, things like that out on the field. But my biggest takeaway has been in listening to the coaching staff talk about him, listening to his peers, his teammates talk about him. They're all saying, hey, he's really humble and he comes to work. You know what I mean? And he's a great leader. Now, he's not a big rah-rah guy. He's not a big stand up in front of the whole team speech sort of a guy, but he understands how to, isolate people one-on-one and say, hey, look, this is what I saw on this play. What did you see? Let's come to a common ground and find the best way to execute this so that we're on the same page. And he gets straight to the point. And I think that kind of resonates with this entire team, right? Because we know that for some of these younger generations, all the players that are in college at this point, their attention span is a lot shorter. So I think that that's really big. I think that he is a phenomenal leader from that aspect. We've heard that echoed, from everybody throughout this entire organization. But also, one of my biggest takeaways is just in hearing some of these cornerbacks, some of these secondary pieces talking about, man, we're getting into some chess matches out there. What that tells me is not only does he have it out on the field physically, and you can tell that, inside of his heart, inside of his mind, he understands what it takes to be that leader, but the game is slowing down for him. Once you can get into those individual chess matches with as fast as things are moving and other people are noticing that too, that lets me know that he's going to go out there and he's going to ball. So I'm very excited to see what he's going to do. I know some people aren't fully sold on Nico just yet, but trust me when I tell you, I've been watching football. I've been around football for my entire life. Some people just had that it factor. Nico most definitely has it. And I think that he could potentially end up being a Heisman Trophy winner if everything falls into place. Now at number 4, I think that the left guard position is going to be an ongoing competition, maybe not for the entire season, but all the way up to that Oklahoma game. So games like UT Chat, games versus Kent State, we'll see a much heavier rotation right there. But obviously versus NC State, probably won't be as much of a rotation. In that game, we'll know who the staff really trusts the most. But once we get to Oklahoma, the first SEC game, and it's on the road, we got to have whoever our guy is has got to be starting. So for some of y'all that's like me as a fan and you hang on to everything that the players and coaches say in press conferences or, media, whatever, I heard Coach Heupel say, number one, Andre Carrick, okay? I heard him say Shem Umarov and then Jackson Lampley. But I also heard Coach Heupel say that you can't make the club in the tub. We talked about that with Andre Carrick. Is he going to be healthy enough? Has he proven to the staff that he's going to be consistent and come to work and come to grind through all the little, bumps and bruises that you have throughout an entire season? Will you be available for us? That's my biggest question mark for Andre Carrick. So who knows who the starter will be versus Oklahoma? Okay, again, we will get to the depth chart here in just a second. I'll tell you who I think the starters will be, but I do feel like we will rotate a whole lot just because if you look at the most upside inside of that room, I think that it's Shem Umarov. He is the youngest player. He has the least amount of experience playing. But at the same time, if you want to look at a player who's experienced and who you know that you can trust in any situation to go out there and get their all for Tennessee, that would be Jackson Lampley. So in my opinion, if I was the offensive line coach or whoever is determining who's going to be the starter at that position, those would be my two. And Andre Carrick would have to prove to me that he's going to show up every single day before I would throw him into that mix at all. But the good news is we've got 3 very capable bodies at that position where it was a major question mark coming out of last season. Who are we going to have? I think that we have 3 people who we can trust right there. So that is very, very encouraging, in my opinion, heading into this season. Now at number 5, our linebackers are going to be very improved heading into this year. Everyone's talking about it. I think especially our insiders. Every time someone asks about our linebackers, they're saying, yeah, we should be a whole lot better than we were last season. And you can see that out on the field. Obviously, if Kenan Pilley's healthy, I think that this entire room just takes a huge step forward because he's played so much football and he's a really good athlete. He can actually make those plays, but he understands what to do. He knows what he's looking at. He's the real vet inside of that room, okay? We do have, obviously, Arion Carter played some last season. Caleb Perry has played some, over the past couple of years, and then Jeremiah Thielander. But whenever you talk about someone that just really has seen so many different things, he's huge as a starter because playing at Mike, he can just kind of guide whoever's playing next to him to where the play is going, right? He can say, hey, look, kind of like a lead blocker, just kind of follow me. I'll show you where this is going. And I think that we need that for some of our up and coming backers, especially a guy like Arion Carter, who I feel like has been so explosive throughout all of fall camp. I mean, he looks like he's playing on a different level, especially from a speed perspective. He looks incredible. And now I think that he could also go down as one of the all-time greats. We have to see it out there, but he does have that ceiling. So he's special from that perspective. Also, like we just kind of talked about, Caleb Perry, he's taken some strides. Looks like he's been a lot more physical out there, playing with more passion. That's what we wanted to see from last year. Then Jeremiah Thielander, man, he's an absolute and total dog. He gets it. He's the son of a coach. And I'm talking about NFL type coach. So he understands how to play this game and he plays it the right way. He's another really good athlete. We haven't talked a whole lot about him, but I'm expecting a really big season from him. Then after that, we've got Edwin Spillman, and we've also got Jalen Smith, who's also taken those strides. I think he's kind of turned that corner. Looks a lot more athletic than he did last year. We talked so much about him coming out of high school as being, hey, this is a guy that could potentially spy any quarterback in the entire country because he's that sort of an athlete. But he took steps back because he gained too much weight, cut that weight down, turned it into some better weight. Now he's out there moving around a whole lot. Edwin Spillman is a guy, as a true freshman, I think can play some, but he just has to get things figured out. Now, I don't know if he has or hasn't. That would be my only hold up for him. But he also plays the game the correct way. So I think that whenever you talk about what has been over the past few seasons, one of the weak spots on this entire team, with our linebacking core, whether that's in pass coverage or whether that's with misdirection, kind of going to the wrong spots. Saw a whole lot of that last season. We're not going to have that this year, okay? I feel very confident in that. So games like Florida that we lost, games like Mizzou that we lost, was primarily off of our linebackers not flowing to the right spots or not being good in pass coverage. The same thing could be said about UGA. Maybe not as much last season, but back in 22, Yeah, I mean, I don't think that our linebackers played great in that game in pass coverage, but again, should be taking a really big step forward. So, what is that going to mean for us throughout this whole schedule? I think what it means is we can expect to win some of those games that we probably would have lost last season. Now, moving on to number six, the wide receiver room is going to have stars. It's been a while since we've had this many stars inside of a room. Now, obviously, we could go back to 2022 when we had Brew. I wouldn't. I don't know if I would even call Brew a star at that point. You know, he was a fan favorite, but was he a real star? I don't know if we could say that to kind of start that season off. Obviously, Jalen Hyatt was a star. Cedric Tillman, he was a star in my opinion, but he was out for most of that season. But then you would have to go back to, I would say, maybe like Jason Swain and Robert Meacham. Then you have to maybe go back to Peerless Price and Jermaine Copeland. Maybe you could throw Eric Parker into that mix. And then you got Joey Kent, Marcus Nash. It's been a while since we really felt like this was wide receiver you. I know some of y'all are probably clamoring for me to say Carl Pickens, but yes, I mean, I feel like we are back to wide receiver you where we have several stars because this year, Brew will be a star. We know that at this point, he is that dude. He's going to make big time plays for us in critical situations. Squirrel White, I have him as a star too. He was our leading wide receiver last season, and he's a dog. He's going to make those big plays in clutch situations. And now we've got a couple more players that are emerging as stars in Chris Brazzell, who I think might end up being the best wide receiver on this entire team. 6'5", 200 pounds, very long, very explosive. He is a dog. He's physical. He will make those tough catches. One-on-one jump balls, you're going to Chris Brazzell. If you're not going to, maybe the tight ends. I mean, we've got plenty of people that you can go to now. But then I also think that Chaz Nimrod is going to emerge this season as another star. But you can't forget about guys like Dante Thornton, who's looked good whenever he's been healthy. Also, you got guys like Caleb Webb, who's been pretty consistent, I would say, dating back to spring. Looked really good in spring. Heard some good things about him throughout all of fall camp. But then you got some of these young bucks like a Nathan Leacock, who's also kind of turned that corner. He's coming into his own. Maybe he could step up a lot for you this season, from his first to his second year. What does he give you? And then we've also got Mike Matthews and Braylon Staley. I love what I've seen from Dayton Sneed dating back to spring ball. And then, I also think that Nate Spillman is a guy who I don't know how much he's going to play or Dayton Sneed, but those are guys that you also trust. And I'm not saying that they're stars, but we're deep inside of that room. I would say we have 4 legitimate stars this year, and that's exactly what we're missing last season. So I think that we will take a really big step forward with the offensive production because of how deep that room is and because of the star potential at the top. So let's move on to number 7. Our cornerbacks are studs. We've heard that a lot from the coaching staff on offense and on defense, but we've heard it so much from their peers that I know that it's true. Anytime that any of the wide receivers are talking about our corners, they either are talking about Ricky Gibson first or Jamal McCoy, but they don't forget to talk about Jalen McMurray and also Jordan Matthews. Those are 2 other guys. And, I would say that Matthews being a guy that's also turning that corner. He's one of the biggest surprises, in my opinion, of all of fall camp. And it's not a surprise in the fact that we didn't think that he could ball, but it's a surprise in the fact of how far he's come, how much he's dedicated himself. Having 4 cornerbacks that you trust is a lot better than what we've had since Coach Heupel has been up on campus. But up at the top, our 2 starters are going to be as good of a duo as you'll see in the entire country. They're really good, and we've been telling y'all that for the longest time. Our cornerbacks are going to be ballers, and they're going to be shutdown, lockdown guys. So that is a huge takeaway. I think that that's a reason for us to have a ton of confidence in, a day and age of football where you've got to have some lockdown guys, at least one of them. But now that we have 2, what does that mean for how we can kind of change up our scheme? What's that mean for Coach Banks and for everyone else? I feel like we can really open things up in a major way. And man, we are going to be very, very difficult to game plan for on defense. Now at number 8, our tight end room is deep and it's talented. So up at the top, we've been hearing so much about Ethan Davis. I think that he could end up being our starter, but it doesn't really matter because we're going to rotate a lot right there. We also have Holden Stays coming from Notre Dame, who's a veteran. You love his skill set. He can go out, catch passes. He's big, he's physical, he's tough. Whether it's in run support or making those tough catches, or even if it's just pass blocking. But the same thing could also be said about Miles Kitselman, who's a guy that a lot of people were surprised about how good of a receiving threat that he is, or that he's shown that he's going to be for this year. But you could just kind of tell that he has that understanding of how to be a savvy veteran in running those routes. And I'll take you back to Jason Witten, not when he was in college, but whenever he was getting towards the end of his career for the Cowboys, he wasn't a good athlete. I mean, he was probably somewhere around a 5 flat 40, but he was able to still make plays just because playing at that position, you're going to be a lot bigger than the players on defense most of the time. And just being older than them, being a little bit more savvy than them, you kind of box them out, right? It's kind of like an older guy play, or older guy or gal playing basketball. You use that, kind of like savviness, right? Like you learn how to use your body to box people out. I think that he's not quite there yet as far as being old. He's still a really good athlete. I don't mean to say it that way, but I think that he has that sort of savviness to his game. So in critical situations, third downs, inside that red zone, things like that, I think that we can trust him. But it's not just him. I think that entire room, we will be a lot more efficient in those sorts of situations just because they will get open. And even if they don't, look open as far as separation goes, they will be able to make plays. So very encouraged about the tight end room. Now at number 9, the star and the safety needs to get figured out still. And obviously the star is a little bit of a different situation because Jordan Thomas goes down. Now we're talking about Christian Harrison versus Boo Carter. And Boo Carter being a true freshman who's got all the upside on the face of this planet, he just has to understand how to play within our scheme. I think that's the biggest question mark for him. If he can prove that he can do that to this staff while also making those plays, then he will probably end up being the starter at the star position at some point this season. But Christian Harrison is not a slouch. He's a great athlete, looks great, looks really good in everything that I've seen him doing out there from a physical perspective, whether that's going in and out of his drills, whether that's, in some coverage stuff, or, just coming up and run support. He's a dog. So that's two guys who we do trust. It's not as much, I would say, of a concern inside of that room as it is for the safeties. Now, I feel like Andre Turntime will probably be one of the starters, and I really felt like Kobe Thomas would kind of, have that separation heading into the season. He could still earn that, but hearing that Will Brooks is kind of still in that mix, also hearing that John Slaughter's kind of still in that mix, it's kind of a gift and a curse because it means, hey, we've got some really good bodies, but at the same time, someone's got to separate as a starter, and the coaches are going to have to be decisive on that. I think that you play your best athletes, especially early on, just because you can all, it's on the coaches to teach these guys what to do. If they don't know what to do, I'll look at that as a coaching issue, not a player issue. 99.9% of the time, you're getting paid a whole bunch of money to get through to these young men and women. So if you can't do that, then that's on you, coach. So in my opinion, definitely think that Kobe Thomas and John Slaughter are the better athletes at safety over Will Brooks, but also feel like Will Brooks is a capable player. I don't think that he's some slouch either, right? Like, he's not some bum. He's not some scrub. He can go out there and he can play. He can give you some very quality minutes. I just will be a little bit more concerned if he's our starter heading into SEC play. Now, he might get the nod early on, but man, by the time we get to Oklahoma, especially Florida, Alabama, you got to put the guys that are physically capable, right? Like with no questions to go out there and compete on Saturdays. So that's my only holdup, I would say, with our secondary. Now on to number 10. Sounds like we will use our headsets, and I'm talking specifically on offense because we know that we're going to use it on defense. And a lot of folks had kind of asked about this. I really feel like this was more of the media making a bigger deal out of this with some of these up-tempo teams than they had to, just because coming out of a football season, it's such a long off season that you've got to kind of, start some narratives and things like that. You got to have some stuff for folks to click on. So I feel like they just kind of made that a lot bigger than it actually had to be. But common sense tells you that you can still signal in those plays if you're going up tempo while also talking to the quarterback inside of the headset and telling him, hey, look, this is the play real quick, but also watch this cornerback on this blitz. Like on this down and distance, this is what they like to do. Make sure that you understand that, we can't take a sack right here. We need to try to work the middle of the field because we don't want to go out of bounds. Things like that, right? So obviously, that's what you would want to do. And then Coach Heupel did just recently come out and say that in his last press conference. There's a lot of different ways that you can use those headsets. But I think that that's going to be huge for Nico in his first season as our starter to, have that coach right there to kind of be his crutch. And I don't think that he'll have as much of a learning curve. I know I've talked before about maybe he'll have more interceptions and, mistakes, things like that, which he will still make some. He's not going to be perfect. But I think that we can lessen that by the coaching staff being able to kind of just give him some of those little, like, hey, look, make sure not to do this or make sure to go here, things like that. That's so so big whenever you're working on the fly. I also feel like because we go up tempo, this actually benefits us a whole lot more than it would with teams that work inside of a huddle because you can get lined up and the headset is still going to be on, I think, until 15 seconds left on that play clock. So you could get lined up, identify things, have your coach say, oh, look, this is what they're in, blah, 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 and then go ahead and run that play. Really get into the correct play, know exactly where to go. So I think that that's really going to be more beneficial to us than people are giving it credit for. That's just my opinion. Y'all let me know y'all's down in the comments section. All right, now for our offensive depth chart for week one. This is just my opinion. Some of it is going to be based off of what I've been hearing and seeing from the insiders, things like that. But obviously, a quarterback, we've got Nico, then Gaston Moore. Running back, I do have Dylan Sampson going. I don't, again, I think he's only going to get maybe 8 or 9 carries in this game. You probably want to get him in, get him out, just get a little bit of burn, but not too much. After him, I think it's probably going to be Deshaun Bishop. And then maybe it's going to be Cam Seldon, but it could also be Peyton Lewis or Khalifa Keith. This all depending on how much do you want to run Cam Seldon. I mean, you probably want to give him some reps in this game if you feel very confident that he is, again, fully clear, but you just want to make sure that we're healthy moving forward inside of this room. That's the whole point. Now for the tight ends, I've got Ethan Davis as the starter, Holden stays right behind him, and then Miles Kitselman. I hope that we see some more 2 and 3 tight end sets, especially in that first game, but just because I want for the staff to be able to have some teaching and coaching points to those sorts of sets and formations moving forward. I think it's going to be very, very critical for our red zone success throughout this year. But I mean, any of those guys could be the starter. You definitely trust all of them. Now let's talk about our offensive line. At left tackle, I've got Lance Hurd. Then I've got Larry Johnson. Left guard, I'm going to go ahead and give Andre Carrick the nod for week one. But like we talked about, I feel like we will rotate a pretty solid amount. And then I'm going to have Sham Umarov coming off the bench right behind him. But it could also be Jackson Lampley. You just never know. I think that really all 3 of those players, as far as what I've seen, pretty much interchangeable. There's just a few subtle differences as to why I feel like Sham would probably be our best starter heading into SEC play, and then Jackson Lampley right behind him. And then I would have Andre Carrick as my number 3. But everything that I've been hearing from the insider sounds like Andre Carrick will be the starter at that position. Now, for center, of course, it's going to be Cooper Mays. I still have Bison Lang right here. And what I did is I didn't want to put the same player on here twice. The insiders have been saying that, if God forbid anything does happen to Coop, then the next guy coming out would be Dane Davis. I think that you really want to try to find, especially early on, who your real true backup center is going to be, because Dane Davis might have to go play somewhere else. He can't play everywhere on this offensive line. We've got to find a true backup center. And I think that right now, Bison Lang would be that guy. Now, on to right tackle, we've got Big John Campbell, and we also have Dane Davis right behind him. How much burn does John Campbell get as a veteran? I don't think he gets too much, right? Like, especially if we can come out, take care of business early on. You want to get, I would say, most of these starters on the offensive line out of the game, but he would probably be number 1 to come out. And then probably after him, I would say Cooper Mays would be number 2 to come on up out of there. At right guard, we've got Javonte Spraggins, of course, and then behind him, I have Aiden Bussell. It could also be Jackson Lampley. We don't know. Again, I think that you probably want to get as many young players as you can out there on the field as early and as often as possible versus teams like UT Chattanooga, Kent State, and UTEP. You want to make sure that you're getting those guys in so that they can get those reps and that they can get that confidence heading into next season. Now in the wide receiver room, I've got Brew McCoy as a starter, Squirrel White, and I've also got Chris Brazo. Now, this is another room that, I do think that we will be rotating pretty significantly with. Been hearing a whole lot of buzz about maybe Chaz Nimrod could be starting over Squirrel White inside of that slot. I don't know how realistic that is necessarily, but in, certain games, certain situations, he could be the guy that you would want to play over a Squirrel White. And I do feel like we're going to rotate a whole lot more inside of this room than we have in previous seasons. Now for our depth chart on defense, our defensive line, I mean, most of these starters, it really doesn't matter because we're going to rotate every chance that we get. If we can rotate every single play, I promise you, Coach Garner would probably want to do that. So I've got, obviously, James Pierce starting off for us at Leo. Then we've got Joshua Josephs right behind him. As far as the strong side defensive ends, I've got Dominic Bailey, and that's mostly from what I've been hearing from the insiders. But I really wouldn't be surprised to see Tyree Weathersby starting right there or Jason Jenkins. Really, again, this does not matter. We're pretty deep, very deep, I would say, inside of all these rooms. And then as far as the defensive tackles go, I've got Big O starting off with Omar Norman Lott. Then I've got Bryson Eason. I've got Big E, Big Elijah Simmons. And then I've got David Hobbs. Again, we'll probably play more than that. Jackson Moy would be right behind David Hobbs. But let's talk about our linebackers. Starting off with the Mike position, I've got Keenan Pili as the starter. Then I've got Jeremiah Telander right behind him. As far as the will goes, I've got Arion Carter. And then I've got Caleb Perry right behind him. Now, for the corners, we kind of talked about this some. We've got Jamal McCoy and Enrique Gibson as our starters. Number 3 and number 4 is going to be Jalen McMurray and then Jordan Matthews. Now, for the star position, I think that the starter will be Christian Harrison and then Boo Carter. It sounds like they will rotate a ton, especially in that first game. And then I would say really by that NC State game, we'll have a better idea of who the staff trusts the most, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we'll have our true starters, coming out of that one. I think that Kent State game will be another one to help us determine who's going to be our starters moving forward. In that Oklahoma game, I would expect that our true starters will be out there on the first reps. Then after that, at free safety, I've got Andre Turntime. That is Dre T. I had to shorten it up just to fit it on this screen. I have him as a starter for sure right there at free safety. Behind him, I have Christian Charles. And then behind that, I've got Edris Farouk. And then talking about the strong safeties, I've got Jacoby Thomas as the starter. Some of y'all might be a little bit surprised to see this, but I do think that at the end of the day, they want to give him every single opportunity to prove to them why he can't start again, just because I think that he is the better athlete, but it could also be Will Brooks. I think that they rotate a whole lot at that position as well, but I've got Will Brooks at number 2, and then I've got John Slaughter at number 3. We will see what happens, but those are my thoughts on all of fall camp and who I think our starting lineup will be heading into week 1. Obviously, the rest of the depth chart, the 2s and the 3s in some spots. Please let me know y'all's down in the comment section. As always, please make sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, share with your friends, family, and other volunteer fans. We'll see y'all in the next one. Thanks. Peace.